we get to our panelists, I want to remind you all, I'm sure you are well versed in Zoom etiquette at this point, but just a couple reminders. Do utilize the chat box. We're super excited to see so many folks that are jazzed to learn more about technology, tips, tricks, and tools, but do be mindful that excessive chatting, because the box does pop up every time a new message comes in, can be distracting to our panelists and to other folks who are on the webinar as well. We do have a Q&A box that is separate from the chat. So you can put your questions about presentation materials in the Q&A box, and throughout the presentations, just know that we'll get to questions at the end. So if you have a question for a specific panelist, you can ask that in the Q&A box, and you can also check out what's in the box already and utilize the upvote feature. So if someone else has a similar question and you are also wanting to know the answer of that question, you can upvote those, and those will pop up the list and highlight, be highlighted for the moderators to see. So those, and if you need any support throughout the time, you can private message Ashley, Carrie, or myself, and we can help you out. They're waving. All right. Now for the good stuff. So today's panelists, these are all folks who wrote in with some tips and tricks that they have around technology and teaching technology that they were excited to share with you all today. So we have Emily Anderson, Jen Cirillo, Allison Thomas, Bobby Farlise Rubio, and Joan Haley. And I don't want to steal their thunder about what they'll be presenting on, but it's all great stuff. So without further ado, Emily, let's go ahead and get you keyed up to go.
Great, thank you, Lindsay. All right, so today I'm going to be talking to you all about iNaturalist, and I'm sure some of you might have heard of it before. If you've ever participated in a BioBlitz, I know there's been a bunch around Vermont in recent years. It's the app that's usually used for that. Today I'm going to be explaining a little bit about how it got started, how it works, and why it's a great teaching tool, especially for using with students. Next slide. Awesome. So iNaturalist began as a graduate student project at the University of California, Berkeley in 2008, and later was joined by the California Academy of Sciences and National Geographic to help with funding. And iNaturalist is what is considered a citizen science tool, and I'm sure a lot of you have heard of citizen science before, or even use it as a teaching tool right now. But for those of you who aren't as familiar with citizen science, it's generally understood as the public involvement in the collection of scientific data, and it can encompass many different areas, everything from astronomy to microbiology. And there's a bunch of different projects, intensities. Projects can take the form of apps where citizen scientists make observations individually, or projects where volunteers are overseen by the guidance of a researcher. So iNaturalist is an app, and it collects information about species ranges and distributions, all with the goal of helping to understand how populations respond to climate change, track invasive species, and it also helps cities and land trusts determine what lands to protect. What I love about it is that it's super easy to use. All you have to do is snap a photo, you upload it to the app, or there's a website for it as well. You can use the website. And then you share it. And oftentimes I find within an hour or two, I have experts from Vermont or farther away commenting and telling me what it is that I happen to see. So it's a great tool for learning more about the biodiversity that's around you wherever you are. The other good thing is that it's free. It's available on all devices. And iNaturalist is for kids 13 years of age or older. So if you're using it with a younger group of students, you either need parental permission, or what I've found in the past for educators is there's a class account, and then students will submit their photos and details to the teacher, who will then share it on behalf of the students. But the great thing about iNaturalist is that you don't necessarily need a background in biology to be able to help your students better understand what species they might be seeing around them if you want to take a trip out into the woods or explore a stream or something like that. Next slide. So I like to describe it as it's kind of like carrying a tiny biologist around in your pocket at all times. You have this community of naturalists who are here to help with identifications, and it takes the pressure off the individual for making the correct identifications. Even though I've spent a lot of time out in the woods in Vermont and spending time in different natural spaces, I'm certainly not an expert in everything that I come across while I'm out there. So for me, iNaturalist is really helpful because by taking a picture and sharing it, I can learn a lot about the species that I might not be able to recognize otherwise. So in this example, I saw a moth visiting flowers in my backyard, and I didn't know what species of moth it was, but I thought it was pretty cool, so I decided to take a photo. And by sharing it on iNaturalist, I got a bunch of suggestions, first from the app saying, well, we think it's in this genus, and it might be in these species. And so from that, I was able to make a guess, and I wasn't quite sure what exact species it might be, but I knew it was probably in the genus Hylas. So I put that down, and within probably a couple hours, I had several different suggestions of different species that it could have been. And so through these suggestions from other community scientists, other experts using the site, I was able to figure out what species it was. And so when I see this moth now, I'm able to recognize it as a Gallium sphinx moth, which is pretty cool. I would not have known that had I not been using the app. And once I share these photos, they also remain in my account, so I can go back and look at them and revisit species that I've seen in the past. Next slide, please. Another great way to use it, besides just learning more about biodiversity through taking photos and using it with students that way, it's also a great resource for class projects. The website itself has a lot of information about where a species might be found at a certain time of year. It's a good resource for photos that students are able to use in projects. It'll give you a map of where it's been seen. So it's a great way to get a lot of background information that's all open source and available to use for projects focused on local biodiversity and better understanding nature. Next, please. So as I just mentioned, this is open source. So where the data goes is that once an observation, which is the photos that you upload, once they have a certain number of experts or other people agreeing as to what the identification is, then they'll end up in the Global Biodiversity Information Facility, which is then accessible to scientists and decision makers all over the world to be able to create studies and draft policies that help with conservation initiatives all over the place. And within Vermont, the Vermont Center for Eco-Studies in Norwich runs the Vermont Atlas of Life, which collects biodiversity data about species in Vermont and is trying to map and monitor how they're changing in response to climate change and other land use related events that are happening across the state. So ultimately, by using this as a classroom tool, you're not only helping your students learn, but you're helping them contribute to this broader set of knowledge around the world. Next slide, please. And finally, as I mentioned earlier, students do have to be 13 years of age or older to use the site independently. However, there's also a site for younger users now called Seek, which functions very similarly to iNaturalist. You can still take a photo. It'll help with identifications. However, the photos won't be published or shared unless they are connected to an iNaturalist account. So you could have students have their own Seek account and then have a Classroom iNaturalist account that then you could share their photos through. So it just creates extra privacy for some of the younger users where there might be more concerns about that. And
all
that's
right,
all.
Emily, thank you. Thank you so much for that tour through iNaturalist. And folks, as a reminder, we do have a document that has all of our presenters' names, their contact information, links to the tools that they're sharing with you, and then a few notes about what they love about them and how they use them. So you'll be able to connect with Emily via contact information on there, or to see how she uses iNaturalist in other ways. So thanks again, Emily. Up next, we have Allie Thomas, who is the Education Manager at Vermont Fish and Wildlife. And I will let you take it away, Allie.
Thanks, Lindsay. So today I'm going to briefly talk about the ways that the Fish and Wildlife Department has utilized audiovisual, especially since last March. We've been using audiovisual for years and with the intentions on using it more and more. And March just basically made us, or COVID made us stop planning and start doing, which was great. It was, we got to avoid a lot of meetings. And so what we're doing now is focusing on as many different varieties of audiovisual clips as we possibly can. And today I'm going to really look at the Facebook Live that we've used, because everything we've done, it's the one that doesn't really require a lot of editing, but there's a little bit more preparation sometimes before. So I'll talk a little bit about the pros and cons of it all. We've created podcasts. We do a lot of 1-minute videos where we might talk about like what season for hunting or fishing, or just phenology of the season, what's happening right now. We do longer videos on how-tos, maybe some basics in information we might have normally provided in an in-person program, whether it be a fishing program or a birding program, a wildlife watching program. We've created in 5-minute videos and sometimes 10-minute videos. And then we've created some virtual courses that are associated with our hunter education programs. All of those were done using GoPros or iPhones. So none of it had really fancy equipment at all, with the exception of podcasts was a little bit more elevated in terms of the type of audio equipment we had to capture really good sound quality. But that's the only time we used anything other than an iPhone or a GoPro. We didn't do any microphones or anything with the others. And we basically uploaded everything to our YouTube channel. However, like I mentioned, all of those require quite a bit of editing, because it is amazing how much footage you can take to create a 1-minute video, right? So one thing we wanted to do to engage people that just really felt raw and real and exciting was Facebook Live. And we did that through sometimes partnerships with the Wild Turkey Federation or Backcountry Hunters and Anglers and us. And so we would have 6 people on a screen at once during Facebook Live using a platform called StreamYard. And what that does is, on our Fish and Wildlife Facebook page, we would have to just schedule an event. And in that event, you'll post the link to the StreamYard. And StreamYard is a free resource if you just use it. You don't have to have an account to use it. And what we do is, with StreamYard, there's a host, much like Zoom, and they can control any PowerPoint you might want to share. And they can also control the mute button for people, which is really helpful and good, because sometimes when you do Facebook Live with 5 or 6 different people from all over the state talking about something they really love, whether it be spring turkey hunting or wildlife trivia, people all start wanting to talk, and that can be tricky because that's especially confusing over the computer, because it just basically makes everything silent. And so it was, what we found was really important, was having a resource and a platform like StreamYard that can mute everybody, which isn't always the case with all of the educational live platforms. So that is a tip that we really enjoyed and liked. The one downfall of StreamYard for Facebook Live is that you can't delete or get rid of the chat box, which isn't a horrible thing. However, it sometimes was tricky, because like when we would do Facebook Live trivia, people kept putting the answers in the chat box, and we kept like saying, please don't put the answer in the chat box. But understandably, it's just, they wanted to contribute, and that's how they did it. So sometimes it was a little bit tricky because of that. So I would say StreamYard is great, but yeah, if having a chat box is going to be a really big issue for you, it might not be the one to use, because it can pose a problem with people posting when you can't really control what they're posting. The big thing with the Facebook Live events, what we found is it's really about putting time in before the event happens, to make sure that you have a nice PowerPoint that you're going to share, if that's the case. Also with it, it doesn't do a great job of sharing audio files if you have a PowerPoint, and you might want to share an audio file on that PowerPoint. And in our case, it was like what a turkey call sounds like in the spring, or maybe a spring warbler calling we were doing during wildlife trivia, and it was really hard to hear no matter what we did with the audio. And so that was also kind of a downfall of it. what we found the workaround was to just post links into our chat box that we made that so you couldn't see what the noise was. It was like a file that we posted there, so you couldn't see, it didn't bring you to Cornell birds or something like that. But that's really the big thing is what we found is people loved that real life interaction of Facebook Live. It didn't take any fancy accounts beyond our normal department Facebook account. StreamYard was free. And the beauty is once you create one of those videos and you do that live event, you have the energy from the live event and real questions that probably a lot of people would ask. And it's recorded. And so it's amazing how often we've used since then those same videos that we recorded for school presentations instead of being live in person, or for a hunting education class that we, again, couldn't be live in person. So they're really, it wasn't intentional, and it was more of a surprise how much like of a library we've created because of those Facebook Live events that in a way are almost more effective than the planned videos we've created and edited, because it's hard to replicate or anticipate all the great questions. But with those Facebook Live events, we had the questions because it was part of the experience. And so we found that although canned videos and planned videos that you can edit are absolutely phenomenal, I don't think we're going to stop doing Facebook Live once we can all get together again in person, because it's like, wow, this is a gem that we found in it. As presenters, it's more fun because it just feels real and organic, compared to sometimes videotaping and editing gets a little anxious feeling. And so having the Facebook Live just really made us all feel like, okay, this is why we do this. We love it. We get some real interaction over the computer, real interaction. So those are the big things that I would say are worth checking out, is StreamYard, and then Facebook and YouTube channel. That's all we used for all of those. And iPhones for the most part, or any type of smartphone that can do somewhat quality recording. So that's about it for me.
Allie, thank you so much. And Carrie, are the links that are in the docs for Allie's presentation, are those directly to Facebook, or is it to Vermont Fish and Wildlife's Facebook?
The ones that I'm putting in the chat box are directly to these programs if people want to kind of follow along and check them out while people are talking about them. And then in the follow-up doc that we'll send out, we'll have some more personalized stuff too. So in that, Allie shared a specific video that she made. So you'll get to check that out after the webinar too.
I know you piqued my interest with some of those videos that you talked about, so I can't wait to go check some of them out. All right. So the next person on our panel, we have Bobby Farley's Rubio, who's a science educator at the Fairbanks Museum and Planetarium. And Bobby, take it away and show us your cool tips and tricks.
Sorry, I forgot to unmute myself. Thank you, Lindsay. Yes, at the Fairbanks Museum, our specialty is doing live interactive education, taking kids out into the field. And when the pandemic hit, I found myself using my video and filmmaking skills. That was actually my major in college. So I was able to use a lot of that to make videos that our audience responded to. A lot of teachers were very grateful for, because they were sort of like 20-minute lesson substitutes. And it was as close as we could get to having a guided experience out in the field, with the encouragement that the kids would go out and look for these things themselves. So what I'm gonna help with, I think, is some of the tech that you might want, some of the hardware that doesn't necessarily cost a lot of money, but I think will improve the quality of any videos that you make, especially if you're trying to document outdoor environments. And I have to say, one of the compliments I heard the most about the videos that I produced for the museum during the pandemic was that people would put them on and they would feel like relaxed, like they were out there in the woods with me. And I tried to think of what it was that I did that created that. And I think I know what it is, and it's easy to do. And that is to pay close attention to the quality of sound. We live in a time where videos today with you know, YouTube and Zoom and TikTok, we don't really care about the production values as much as people used to in the past. But one thing I will say that makes for the feeling of a high quality immersive video is an unbroken soundtrack, where you don't have a lot of pauses or changes in volume and audible cuts. With something like iMovie, it's very easy to mix in things like crossfades where the sound changes, but here's an easy tip that I highly recommend. Here is a device this is a Tascam DR05, but you don't need to use this one. This is a high quality audio recorder with left and right microphones. It creates a stereo track that's almost as if you were in that environment. And if you use some headphones, you can hear how sensitive this microphone is. And you can put it on a camera tripod. You can get a cheap sock, or maybe this device that's actually sold as, it's called the Dead Kitten. Sorry, it's not my idea. But this little fuzzy thing blocks out the wind. And one thing that I did when I was making videos, because they came out every 2 weeks, was I would get up at sunrise, or actually about an hour before sunrise, and set up this recorder to get the dawn chorus. And I did it every 2 weeks. So every time I made a new video, it was in the spring, you could hear the changes in the bird calls. And I didn't really like specifically talk about it in the video, but it was a constant background, something like around 30% of actual volume, so that whenever I wasn't speaking, or whenever there wasn't an actual live scene in the woods, you would hear this real natural breezes and birds. And I think this is why my friends that live in Brooklyn would put my videos on in the background just to like relax. I had a friend that grew up in Vermont, lives in Brooklyn, and during the pandemic, they used my videos as like stress management. So, and I think this is why. So pay close attention to audio, try to take out all those cuts and pops and gaps. And it doesn't take much, something like this, or an actual phone. If you don't want to buy another piece of equipment, take your phone and set it up in a place where it won't pick up vibrations from footsteps or cars out in the field. Set it down to record a video for 15 minutes and then use that as your bass track. Think of it as sort of like a carrier frequency that is underneath your video. Other things that I can recommend, a lot of, if you, just to build on what Ali was saying, you should expect to get a lot more footage than you're gonna need for the video. And my ratio that I've always used since I made documentaries is about 10 to 1. So if you're gonna make a 6-minute video, you should expect to have an hour of footage to chop up into that. So it can get overwhelming. And sometimes the biggest problem is if you're narrating a video, you might have a perfect shot, but then you screw up the narration and then you're like, oh, I gotta go do it again. Well, not necessarily. I think using voiceover is a great way to save time so that you can focus on getting good shots and good video or good stills, and then you can record it later. And they're not that expensive. You can find microphones like this. Is a studio quality microphone. It connects to USB on your computer. And using iMovie, there's easy things that you can do to record a voiceover where you narrate right over the video. So if you have this bonus soundtrack with the natural sounds and you can do a voiceover, you can make up for less than optimal conditions at the site where you're recording. Because let's say you're recording a really cool bird, but there's traffic in the background and you don't want that to be part of the shot and it gets in the way of your narration. You can save the shot and not have to go do it again by replacing the audio with something that's natural from the same area and a good quality voiceover. Now, it's only because I have a band and I record music and all that I have one of these things, but you can make one out of a coat hanger and some stockings. It's called a pop stopper, and it's just to stop your voice from making that percussive P sound. So these things, I'm fussy about audio. I'm very picky about it. But I think when you spend that much time on it, it makes a higher quality video and it makes it more enjoyable, where you might actually get students to want to rewatch it again and again. Now, it was George Lucas who said that audio is 60% of a movie. And if you're a fan of the Star Wars films, you might agree that the audio from those films is probably some of the most memorable things. That's what the sound effects that kids run around making. But when it comes to picture, I can't overstate the need for good lighting. And this is something you can buy for $30. It runs on a rechargeable battery. It's basically LEDs, so the batteries last for hours. And it fits onto the hot shoe of a camera. So if you have like a good digital SLR, you can buy this massive, spotlight. It changes color. You can actually change the color with little gels like this, and it will allow your camera's focus to work a lot better. Because if you have a hard time focusing, usually that's a problem with not having enough light. And when it comes to things like insects or flowers or things that you want to get a tight shot on, I've discovered that sometimes the most beautiful images can be generated at night with a good light. Because sometimes your camera focuses on the details that you want, and it creates sort of a magical effect when it's artificial light at night on something. But I hope this is not too technical for everyone. But you don't necessarily need to spend money on a camera if you have a good phone. If you have, I had an iPhone 7 when I was making all the videos that came out through the pandemic. My phone battery was dying all the time, and I just upgraded to a newer one, an 11. And with all these fancy cameras, honestly, you don't really need to worry about getting a camera if you have a good phone. But if you want something that will give you a lot more professional looking shots, here's a little device that I picked up a few years ago. It's called an Osmo, and it's kind of a cute camera because it automatically stabilizes itself. So if I'm running around on a trail, jiggling around, this thing stays still and it makes the shot look very steady. So it creates that a feeling that the person is floating through the woods. And I don't know about you, but a lot of folks I know complain about nausea when they watch videos that are too shaky. So something like this can take that shaking out. There's a lot of ways to do it digitally, but this really works well. However, I wish I had waited before I bought this to get the newer model. The company that makes the drones, DJI, sells this. This is expensive. This is in the hundreds of dollars range, but you can buy one now that instead of having a built-in camera, holds your phone. So your phone and your camera, and that simplifies everything because the videos will still be where you know how to get them. But when you put it on this mount, you can run around and chase a kid through the woods or a turkey, and the shot will look like you were floating behind them instead of shaking and making everybody nauseous. So if you really think you're going to be making a lot of videos and you want to buy a camera, something like this or the newer model that holds your phone might be ideal. So I'm happy to advise on any particular projects that folks have, but I think getting good natural audio is also sort of therapeutic in addition to making a high quality video. So this will kind of be the best substitute you can get. A lot of people watch things with headphones. So if you have this stereo recording of bird songs, it can be, immersive, and I think it's worth spending the time on. So I hope that's helpful, and I guess we'll take questions at the end. I think that's about all I have to say. And I'm also doing another set of videos where I'm narrating constellation guides. It's sort of the newest challenge, which is to replace what we do in the planetarium. And we try to make them very short. But in that case, I try to make sure that the audio is tolerable so that you don't hear echo. So one little thing I did build, one more thing you might want to think of. If you do a lot of narration, see this little thing? I just took some egg crate foam and a sonotube scrap that we had left over in the shed, a little duct tape and some of those old brass fasteners. And I made a little portable audio booth. So whenever I set up my microphone, I just put this around it. And it doesn't matter if I'm in a good room with good acoustics or a room like the planetarium with lots of echo, it creates a kind of like a studio effect. And it makes it sound like I have a much better quality microphone than I really do just by, a piece of cardboard. So tricks like that, I'm happy to help with any of those, but those are some of the technical tricks that I think will take your videos and make them more watchable and make people want to see them again and ups the level of production so that they might be more likely to get shared. So I hope that's helpful. I think that's all, Lindsay.
Great, Bobby. Wow. That was an incredible walkthrough of those tools and materials that you have. And I love the Ali was saying that Facebook Live was new for her and her organization, but Bobby, it sounds like this is, well within your wheelhouse. And so I love that we have so much variation of experience on this panel. And I think it hopefully speaks to where maybe some of our audience might be at too on the different spectrums and ranges. So thanks again for that. All right, next up we have Joan Haley, who is the Director of Partnerships of Education between Shelburne Farms and Marsh Billings Rockefeller National Historic Park. I think I got all those words in there. So Joan, take it away.
Thanks, Lindsay. And thank you, Bobby, too. I feel like you shared a lot of secrets that I've always wondered about in terms of just that smooth flow. I wondered how people did that if they're actually running after a kid. So now we know. Well, I'm going to talk about Flipgrid. Flipgrid is one of my favorite tools because I love to get kids to interact and adults as well in professional development. And sometimes, as we know, especially now, we can't always be here at the same time. We can't obviously be in person a lot of the time. So this is about as good as it gets when you have to be remote and asynchronous. It's really easy to use. It's free. Of course, you can get more bells and whistles with a subscription, but I haven't found the need for it, honestly. So it can be as interactive as you can be when you're not here now. So let's just walk through some of the things that it offers. Again, I really like the fact that it's interactive, and to me, it's very helpful because I always, thank you, Lindsay, I have to remember to tell you to switch screens. To me, it's also very powerful because we've all been in groups where there's that, 15 kids and there's those 1 to 2 kids who are constantly raising their hands and, bless them all, but they're taking up about 70% of the space while the others are in the background, not contributing necessarily because they're waiting for those 1 to 2 people to answer everything. So this really provides that equal opportunity for some people to step back a little bit and other people to step forward, and everybody gets to hear the voice and share. And so I really appreciate that. And the great thing is that kids get to practice. So if they don't like what they said, they get to erase it and start again until they really like how they're presenting. So wouldn't we all like to do that sometimes? So you can sign up through a Google account. You can sign up through Microsoft. You can use it through Google Classroom. There's a lot of different ways to share this. And you just, of course, go to flipgrid.com. So if we go to the next slide, please. So when you go ahead, when you initiate it, you do a prompt. It's very easy for what students see. So they just go to this, this plus sign right here and press on that. You supply, the prompt that you supply can be either written or verbal. Either one is very easy to do both. And again, you can share it in multiple ways. Kids don't have to even sign up. They just need a code they can click on and just be all online. You can attach video links to it, or kids can attach it. They can do fun stickers. They can do background things. They can get really creative and personal, which is also something that I learned. Personalize it, their presentation. And you can also set the response time. So if you just want kids to talk for 10 seconds, that's fine, or they can go on for minutes. So you get to kind of set that depending on what you want. Next slide, please. You can either organize it by topic. So if you have multiple classrooms or multiple groups of students, you can have one prompt and then just have your different groups go ahead and use the same prompt. So if you have that, you can also, again, through Google Classroom, it kind of facilitates that. You can easily add a topic, as you see up here or up in the corner there. You can also organize it, next slide, please. Organize it by group. So you can individualize your groups, and they can all have different prompts and ways of responding, and they'll just be within their own group. So that it's a little bit more private. You can add another teacher if you want another teacher to help you co-facilitate it as well. And you can also easily duplicate prompts. Next one, please. Thank you. And so we use this actually a lot in professional development. This is someone who was in our Force for Every Classroom course. Garen, who teaches at the Bellwether School, and he likes to use this as well. So you can, when you're going through the responses from students, or in this case, adults, you see here on the right-hand side, you see it says Amy there. You can scroll through very easily people's responses. So you don't have to, for example, open up different Google Docs to get people's responses, or different areas within Google Classroom. You can just kind of click through and get everybody's responses very quickly, as well as the students that you're working with can do that as well. So you can also share responses in multiple different ways. You can look under action there. You can make comments on responses, either written or through, again, a quick video. You can make a mixtape of responses to get kind of a collage of it. And also you can delete responses, you know, for that kid that says that thing that you don't want to be public or even shared with other kids. So you get to kind of edit if you want, and you can turn off the editing mode if you totally trust your kids, which is nice. Next one. And then finally for teachers, it's a good way to just like give quick feedback on what they said. And it's honestly for kids who are used to doing things, you know, online verbally more and visually more than writing, it's a really easy kind of dip your toe in the water way of getting a response from them. So they can quickly record themselves. They can give a, you know, a response to your prompt. You can grade it quickly and keep your grading. And again, you can kind of sync it with Google, and you can write private comments to them as well. So that is why I love this. That's it.
Right, Joan, thank you so much for that tutorial of Flipgrid. I can think of so many different ways to use it, especially in a time like now when so many teams are still needing to meet, but we maybe have never met in person. And so what if you did like a, you know, introduce yourself on Flipgrid and you could see your whole team's introductions there. I think that would be neat. But, all right, and our last presenter is Jen Cirillo, who is the Director of Professional Learning at Shelburne Farms. And Jen is going to take control of our screens now and show us some cool stuff.
Thanks, Lindsay. And sorry, I might have been a little bit distracting during Joan's moments there. Our dog just ran up to a skunk 5 feet away and didn't get sprayed with the skunk. We have 2 dogs. It was chaotic here for a second. So apologies, Joan. I disappeared and came back in. So yeah, I have Jamboard, which is a very cheap and easy tool from the Google Suite. The way that I wanted to show you, there's kind of a couple of ways that I use it with professional learning and with students in the virtual world. And I kind of think about a couple of ways. One is as a template. One is sort of more for group processing and reflecting or kind of gathering input from a group. So either kind of the pre-gathering information from them and then reflecting. And then brainstorming, organizing, and affinity mapping. So just to briefly introduce this, it's part of, you know, if you have a Gmail account, you would just go to that account and pop open Jamboard. It's in the little, the apps here. And just to sort of help you understand how easy it is to use, I really love to use flip chart paper and sticky notes and markers, and this has a lot of that same function just in the virtual world. So you can make a sticky note, you can draw right on. So the drawing isn't very beautiful, but you can circle something, you can point and select things and move them, you can add a photo, and you can add text just right in here. And you can add some different shapes into here. And maybe really fun is sort of this color pen laser. So the way that I've been using it as a template is one of the activities that I do with both teachers and students is have them look at the Sustainable Development Goals from the UN, and there's 17 of them. And when I'm in person, I'm using little paper cards, index cards with these printed on them, and students get to manipulate them and prioritize them about how they might think about these goals for their self, their community, or the globe. What makes it really easy to do with the Jamboard is you make one template. I could copy it for each of the groups of students that are working on this, because you can easily make a copy. And then the students can manipulate it. So this is a group of students that took this previous organized by the 17 goals, and then they were able to start manipulating it and putting it into clusters of goals that they thought were important. They started to be able to ask some questions, or make some connections like we need more access to solar, we need to do a better job in school of sorting our waste. And this is helping them think about some of the projects they might do. So as a template, the other way that I'm using it is for group processing. So this is what sometimes is referred to as a chalk talk. So you might put up paper on the wall or have a chalkboard. You pose an interesting question, and then people can silently brainstorm. And this actually worked really well for somebody who was looking for feedback on a project. So she presented her project. She wanted to generate as much feedback as she could in a short amount of time. So we used this tool. People were able to ask questions. They were able to give her some ideas and feedback. And then she was able to go through and sort of suggest, these are the things that I want to talk more about. And then we were able to have a conversation. So this is sort of gathering some input or some group processing. And then this is sort of on the outside. So one of our attendees, Courtney, this is from a workshop she did. This is just a way to process at the end. So what are you taking away? So you could think of it as like an exit card. What's something you're still wondering about? And what's something from today you want to try with your students? So classroom teachers participating in an online program, this is something we used at the end. And again, like just super easy, very similar to doing something in person with Post-it notes. A way to debrief a workshop or a whole, this was a 3-day event. And because Jamboard, you can add multiple pages. So this was a great way to just synthesize and put everything into one place. So, you know, just a reflection questions, what worked. Then we can start to see things that people agree with, multiple people love the keynote, so we know that was really good. And so this little top navigation bar allows you to add additional pages. Another way that we've used it is for organizing information. So this image below from Up for Learning is their way that they think about youth-adult partnerships. And then we were looking at a series of examples from farm to school programs where folks could just take those and say, where do you think this belongs on this scale of youth-adult partnership? So it's a way of organizing or putting kind of an affinity map of where you might place different things. The sticky notes were pre-generated, and folks got a chart with some additional information to help them better understand, well, what does number 7 maple sugaring really look like in order to place it? But then the sticky note then can be moved. Actually, different people had different ways of placing there. So then we could look at the different Jamboards together and then say, what could we do to move this maple sugaring project to youth and adults as full partners if that was our goal? And then the last example that I have sort of, again, around that affinity mapping, because you can choose the color of your sticky note, we said all of the things that we're trying out in the virtual context, let's put in yellow, what are we learning in green, and what support do we need in blue? So you can sort of organize an affinity map collectively. So, you know, great for team meetings, great for student projects, and again, sort of super easy and really familiar to those of you who've been doing a lot of flip charts and sticky notes. This basically takes the place of doing that. And we found some other interesting ways to use this. We're using it with school nutrition staff to develop a meal plan that addresses the new dietary guidelines. So, you know, you can make a template for whatever kind of project you're working on and then repeat that and have people be able to kind of fill it in again, like sticky notes or being able to do something on a chalkboard. So that's it.
That is such a cool tool, Jen. That is so great. I find that that's one of the things I miss so much in being away from the office is not having my big thinking paper. But I really love that, that tool. So thanks for sharing. So thanks to all the panelists for sharing, and thanks for such a patient audience that has probably been sitting on their incredible questions or using the Q&A box for those questions. And Ashley or Carrie, have either of you
We don't have any questions in the Q&A box yet. So surprising. So folks, if you're ready, if you have questions, go ahead and put them either in the chat box if that's easier for you, or into the Q&A box. Maybe we can take a look at our next couple of slides while we wait for folks to share their questions with us.
Great. So we do have another webinar coming up next month, Thursday, November 14th at 4 o'clock. It is Outdoor Learning in Winter. And knowing that many classroom teachers and outdoor educators, of course, are focused on having students outside, and especially in Vermont, that can certainly present some challenges for our learners of any age. So we are going to be doing a webinar on how to best keep your learners, whatever age they are, safe and comfortable in outdoor settings, and maybe some tools and tips on how you as a facilitator or an educator can be prepared for all that winter in Vermont can bring. So please join us on Thursday, November 14th at 4 o'clock. And I doubt you can actually click the link right there. So we'll get that link
right into the chat box.
There you go.
It'll show up there in just a sec. So we've got a couple questions for Bobby. First, a quick one. Bobby, can you repeat the name of the audio recording device that you introduced at the very beginning? Oh, don't forget to unmute yourself.
I've been on Zoom before, I should know. But this is a Tascam DR05, and this is about 75 to 100 bucks. And it's good enough to record a live musical performance. That's what they're originally meant for, but they're really great at recording nature sounds. They can hear frequencies below, above and below what you might pick up. So you might hear stuff in the recording that you didn't hear when you were there. And I see a question in the Q&A about editing software. I learned how to edit video digitally with Final Cut Pro, which is the somewhat like $300 version. The iMovie is very frustrating for me, but we don't have the budget for me to get Final Cut Pro at the moment, but I would much prefer that. A lot of people like the Adobe Premiere, and because of Adobe's cloud-based charging, you can actually get Adobe Premiere for 1 month for something like $10 to $15 a month. And then you get nothing at the end of that month. But if you know you're going to be editing just for a short period of time, that's professional quality software. And you can find tons of YouTube videos on how to use it. But the Apple stuff that I use, Final Cut Pro, is definitely better. I just don't have it. So iMovie is what I'm stuck with. But since it's free on any Mac laptop, it's good to learn how to use. It's great for limited things. It's just very frustrating if you're as picky as me, I guess.
Thanks, Bobby. And a question for Jen here about Jamboard. Becky wants to know if it's pretty easy to learn and intuitive, or if there are other great resources that you'd recommend for getting up to speed.
Yeah, no, I think there is like a little tutorial online. It's Jamboard tutorial, but I don't think you need it. I think if you just go into your Google suite of apps, if you don't see it, you can add it. And then just play around with it, because you can just test everything out. That's what I did before the first time I used it. And then the students that I work with were actually all really comfortable, and it interfaces really nicely with Google Classroom. So if you've already using Google Classroom with your students, you can insert Jamboards, and that can be a place also where they do assignments, and they can upload photos and stuff like that right onto the Jamboard. So it's quite intuitive, and it interfaces with Google Drive and other Google suites, so you can kind of match them if you're using that platform already.
Thanks, Jen. And a question from Beth for Allie. Does Fish and Wildlife have any saved resources not on Facebook that might be able to be used in schools? If so, maybe you could share a link with us, Allie.
You mean audiovisual resource, like actual video? Is that what they mean? Because we have a lot of saved resources that are more just writing and pictures, but that the videos are pretty much all on that Facebook page link that includes everything, with the exception of some that are in production right now.
And you mentioned YouTube as well. Are your Facebook Live videos saved on YouTube that can maybe be?
It's all there, yep. If you go to the department website, if you just Google the department name, on the bottom left, there's a Facebook link and a YouTube link. And so everything is archived there, which is really convenient and nice.
Great. And we'll make sure that those links are in the follow-up doc that you'll all get. Great. Just to clarify, somebody caught our mistake with the date here. Our next webinar is on Thursday, November 19th. So just to clarify that. Thanks for the great questions, folks. I'm just going to scan the chat box again here, see if any more snuck in. It's looking good. Great. So any more questions from the audience before we start to wrap up? All right, Ashley, do we have a little wrap up poll today? We do. Okay, great.
Great. Yeah, I will just launch that. And I just put the link to the Fish and Wildlife YouTube in the chat box for folks as well. So I'm just going to launch a quick poll. This is just a feedback poll. As always, we'd love to hear from you all and your experience and what you thought of today's session. So feel free to go ahead and click in there. It should automatically be popping up for you. And if you have any other additional feedback that you'd like to type in, feel free to use the chat box. You can send it to just the panelists. If you see that little to button, you can click to all panelists and we'll hear from you. And hopefully we'll see you at our next session in November, where we'll be diving into teaching outside in the winter. So again, thanks to all of our panelists and thanks to the attendees for being here today. We love having you all with us. So thanks again, virtual round of applause. And does anybody else, any of the presenters, have anything that you want to kind of end, a little tip for the road, a little last minute piece you want to share with folks?
I just wanted to say, I just noticed with all these tools, as hard as it is not to be with people sometimes, it's also really easy to document your work. So with the stickies, for example, I think we've all had to roll up flip chart paper and have a bunch of stickies flying all over the place. And now you can just, access it again, keep working on it. And so there's a lot of silver linings that I think these tools have to offer.
Great.
One quick thing I'll say is it's amazing how forgiving people are. Like, I think it's awesome how good Bobby is and his audio is beautiful. I've held the camera upside down for like a solid 5 minutes before in my videos, and like that got the most like watches of any of our videos just because it's funny, like watching me walk on the ceiling. So like I feel like don't worry if you're not an expert, just have heart and send your message out there and people will be supportive and patient.
I hardly endorse what Ali just said. It's true. I'm more harsh on my own stuff, but people are not that picky. they just love, they actually love bloopers more than, perfectly produced things anyway.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Have a great afternoon, and we will see you next time.
See everybody. Happy Halloween.
Thank you.
Are we staying on? Okay.
You can pop up the participant list and you can just see who's still left in the audience. Oh, nobody now. Yeah, so they're all gone.
Should be gone.